we're professionals and we're so in our pleasure in our bodies, and that's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something that is wrong or dangerous. It's our power.
I can find a lot of women can shame themselves, like I'm too sexual, I'm too kinky. But B, there's a whole category of people who I don't think have ever even investigated. Could I have a sexual type? Like, what is my authentic sexual expression?
The first time somebody bit me, I was like, what? Oh, I like that.
Can you describe your first sexual awakening?
First time I had sex, I was 23 with my boyfriend, who did not know that I had never had sex.
I'm Layla Martin. I'm your host of This Tantric Life. This podcast is for you to learn about and be able to use the incredibly powerful system of Tantra in your life. I have been teaching and studying classical and neo-Tantra for over 20 years. And when you apply that to sex, love, and relationships, as I love to do, you end up having conscious relationships, the deepest, most epic and magical sex, and the kind of intimacy that you get to be grateful for on your deathbed. Hi, and welcome back to This Tantric Life. I'm your host, Layla Martin. I'm so excited for my conversation, my play space today. We may or may not be squirting watermelon juice all over ourselves because that is what happens when Dr. Kat Meyer is in the room. So she is a licensed psychotherapist who does innovative work in the field of sex and psychedelics. I have such profound respect for her because she really pioneered having a sexual erotic voice and encouraging people to find their deepest erotic expression while also being in the professional field of psychotherapy, which traditionally asked a therapist to keep that packed up and in. And she really went out there saying, this is important, this is valuable, this needs to be talked about. And in that wave, she's really been on the forefront of how to accelerate and heal our eros, our sexual expression in very rapid ways. So she does ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And in my experience, she's not only one of the most playful, fun, wild creatures that exists on this planet, she's an invitation into magic, but she uses her professional platform to invite people into the farthest edges of what it takes to come home to their sexual selves and their sexual satisfaction, whether that's BDSM, psychedelics, breath work. She uses all of the most potent tools so that we can be sexually satisfied in this life. Welcome, Dr. Kat.
Oh, baby, I'm so honored.
All right, I was like, we could talk about so many things, but I just want to talk about sex.
Yeah, let's do it. Yes.
So one of the things, Kat, that I would actually love to jump off with is to invite us to talk about what people are actually experiencing out there in sex. Because you're a therapist. You talk with clients all the time about sex.
Yes.
Right? I work with people all the time on their sex life. And we can talk about this rarefied sexual experience, right? Which is sadly rarefied in our culture, but shouldn't be. And we're going to talk about how to get there, how to have the most erotic activation, the best orgasms, how to create the deepest sexual fulfillment. But I'd like to start with acknowledging, like, where are most people at in sexuality? What do you see as a sex therapist?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to acknowledge, like, congratulations to everybody listening to this episode because you're about to get some epic knowledge here. Yeah, it's interesting to see some of the same patterns of things that come into my office, and a lot of it is around a mismatch of sexual desire or a mismatch of sexual expression, like how it is that our bodies speak in languages. And so I end up seeing one of those in the relationship overriding what's authentic to them in order to preserve the relationship. And so if you do that for an extended period of time, it's like you lose the motivation for sex, or you lose the motivation to want to initiate or to receive it because it's either not satisfying you, you're not able to orgasm, you're not able to maintain an erection, or it's just not exciting for you because it's not you. Right? And so it's having to differentiate people and recognize that you and your partner or whoever else is in the relationship are different people, are individuals with their own individual expression of sex, needs in sex, wants. and styles to be able to untangle, how we put the responsibility onto the other person to turn you on or to get your needs met or to make you orgasm.
Could you give us some examples of like people's types of sexual expression? Like when you say there's a mismatch, can you give examples of like what kind of sexual person could you be?
Yeah.
Such that there could even be a mismatch.
Yeah.
Because I don't even think people think of that.
Yeah. So there is, some of us can be more sensual where we're more attuned to softness and more gentleness in sex. Or some of us are energetic who are drawn towards, the subtle energies of the body and the movement of the body. Or we may be drawn towards something that's sacred in sex or sex is something that's sacred. We may be interested in more kinky or BDSM type of fringe type of sex, role play or bondage or impact play. Some of us may be more attuned to the socially constructed idea of what sex is, which is genital focus, body focus, naked. Maybe some of us want more orgies, or we want multiple partners, or we want to swing and swap partners. There's even how we relate to the initiation of sex. Some of us like to be grabbed and put up against the wall, or some of us like to be blindfolded and tied down to the bed. Some of us like really soft, gentle whispers in the ear, or cuddles up and starting grinding into the bodies. And if somebody likes more of the rough, aggressive type of sex, and they're approached with more of this like gentle, like pulling the partner in, in the morning of sex and gently, cuddling, they're going to be annoyed. They're going to be like, oh, get off of me, or vice versa. You want something that's more sensual, and then they aggressively touch you, and you're like, get the fuck off me. I don't know if I can cuss in here, but fully expressed, here we go. So it's jarring. And if we say no, or if we freeze, then that can be translated to the other person as rejection. I'm just trying to approach my partner because I'm attracted to them, because I love them, because I want to have sex with them, and then they reject me.
I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to my teachings, and if you want to support this podcast, the best way to do it is to sign up for my email list. Email list sounds old school, and yet it is where I share my most intimate teachings, the path, process, heartbreak, and triumph of my life, and so much of the content that I make for you on a regular basis. So the way you get on the email list is by heading over to laylamartin.com, put your email address into any of the boxes. You can also sign up for cool practices like sex magic or energy orgasm, totally free. Heading on over to laylamartin.com, signing up with your email address. This supports the podcast. It supports this entire work and is the number one way for you to receive the highest teachings of this path. It brings up this very interesting point, which is most of us got taught of sex as this monolithic experience, right? Or like we didn't get taught that it was anything other than a monolithic experience, meaning you just have sex.
Yeah.
Like it's just sex. And everybody wants to have sex the same way, which is, I don't know, get off, right?
Yeah.
Like have an orgasm. Or, as a woman, maybe you kind of don't want it, but then you really do. And he like always wants it, right? But the actual sex, it was kind of like, oh yeah, that's just what people do. And one of the things I've found is people make themselves so wrong for what they want, right? Like if a man's sensual, he's like, oh, but I'm supposed to just like want tits and ass, or like just want cock, or whatever it is, right? Or if a man is kinky sometimes, oh, I'm supposed to be more sensual. I'm supposed to be more just energetic, right? I can find a lot of women can shame themselves. Like, I'm too sexual. I'm too kinky. Or, I'm so sensual and energetic. I can't find a partner. Like, it's like so many people are in this story of A, maybe there's something wrong with me. But B, there's a whole category of people who I don't think have ever even investigated. Could I have a sexual type? Like, what is my authentic sexual expression? We've never even asked ourselves that question or given ourselves the space to explore it. I would say for a lot of sex with people just watching porn all the time or just assuming they know what everybody else is doing, it's kind of the equivalent of maybe living in
the suburbs of like Kansas or something your whole life and never even realizing that Burning Man happens.
Yeah.
Right? Or never even realizing that like, you know, you could take LSD and like have an orgasm with a tree in the forest, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're fully capable of going to Burning Man. You're fully capable of taking LSD and having an orgasm with a tree, but you would never just stumble upon it. You almost need to realize that it's possible to let your full expression through. And so what's interesting with sex is we basically have pornography and like Netflix. But other than that, nobody is ever like, hey, bro, what kind of sexual expression do you have? And like, what could I grow into? Like, what could I try on? Who am I as a sexual being?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And we are social creatures. Mm-hmm. So it does help to have these reference points of what's possible. It's almost like our brains are this computer that we only have the programs that we've experienced or that we've heard of. So how can we expect ourselves to know a whole nother program of what's possible if we haven't experienced that, if we haven't seen it, if we haven't witnessed, or if we haven't met somebody who holds that expression. And this is why the work of our colleague, Jaya, is really helpful in this regards, because she talks about these different languages and organizes them for people. Like people
the erotic
love
blueprints.
The erotic blueprints, and people love organization.
Yeah.
So it gives us something to start the conversation of. Yeah, people have the experience of porn or all the messages that they grew up with. I grew up Catholic, and sex meant something that sacred that you save till after marriage. Well, I've kind of blown that out of the water. Sorry, Mom and Dad, but
in like a spectacular way.
Yeah.
Like ex-Catholic, you have done so fucking well for yourself.
There's a quote that Catholic people will always have exciting sex lives because, or ex-Catholics, former Catholics, because there's this taboo nature that's then put on this idea of sex. And taboo is one of those elements that contributes to erotic desire. So it amplifies our attraction towards something. We're doing something naughty, we're doing something wrong, we're doing something sacrilegious, and then it's like, oh, I'm bad for doing this, but it's so hard to be able to do that. So just putting that out there. There's this, but it's hard for people to break through that. It's hard for us because there's the shame attached to it, or there's the guilt attached to it from all the messages that we've gathered, whether it's from our family, from our culture, from our peers, that you're going to be a slut, or something's fucked up about you, or if you are into BDSM and kink, that you come from trauma and you're messed up and you're sick. So there's a lot of layers that we have to bring the conscious awareness to, first of all, as like the foundational piece. And then to realize that there is something else out there can be in that next layer. And by working with people like us or other coaches or therapists who specialize in this, and also to be able to see people embody this. It's like we're professionals and we're so in our pleasure in our bodies, and that's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something that is wrong or dangerous. It's our power. And so to see people integrate these parts rather than segment them and say, like, I only have, in order to be taken seriously, I can't be in my sensual, sexual, erotic expression. I can be both of those is really important. I also think that, back to the idea of reference points too. And this is why I do the work with the psychedelics and primarily with ketamine-assisted therapy, because in psychedelics we can have these reference points that aren't available to us in our typical everyday life. The concept of expanded consciousness, in that space.
So a reference point, I believe what you mean by that is you have an experience of something, and then you can be like, oh, I can go back there. Like that's possible.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because now it's in your awareness or it's in your embodied expression, and you can go back to that. I remember my very first ayahuasca ceremony. I went into the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror while I was washing my hands, and I connected with the adorableness of myself. Like I felt the embodied sense of self-love. And I had been a therapist for years prior to this, and I had known the concept of self-love, and I'd been preaching self-love, and, like Instagram is like, just self-love yourself, but that concept is actually way more complex than people realize. And in this moment, I had the actual embodied expression and understanding of that for me to be able to then integrate into my life. I knew what I was going back to. And that was easier to do than to have the intellectual concept of self-love and try to reach that, having not really understood it on the embodied level.
A couple things I want to highlight. So one of the ways that you opened me in your shameless ownership of your sexuality was largely actually in BDSM. Because I'd never been around a woman who claimed her desires and owned them as deeply as you in that particular way. And there was a phrase you used, hope it's okay that we share it, we could always cut it out, but you were like, I love to be beaten. And like, obviously consensually, but like, and I now know what you mean by that, which is like, you love being flogged, you love intensity play, you love like just the fucking intense sexual experiences, right? And to see a woman own that and claim that, it was like, oh, like what could be possible for me if I let myself own that all the way? And for a little while, there was like a man in our lives that we were both kind of exploring, kind of playing with for a little bit. And he was so drawn to you for many reasons. But one of the reasons was that you claimed being a submissive so deeply. Or that you could play that part.
I could play that part,
as deeply as you do. Yeah. And we won't keep you in just a singular cage, Kat.
You cannot.
Too big for that. And I really thought about it, and I could feel this like longing in me. And I think this is really important for everyone to track. That could have easily turned into jealousy or judgment. But actually underneath it was a longing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, am I possibly a submissive? Like, is that an element of sexuality I've never let myself experience? And I think it's important to highlight for everyone, number one, because it took me that many years and I'm in this field to even ask myself that question. So what questions are we not asking ourselves about who we might be sexually or what we might enjoy?
Yeah.
Was a big piece. And then so many of my ideas about myself, but also who I'd encountered as partners and also my own trauma kept me from really owning that desire, right? Because my trauma was like, it's not safe to be a submissive, right? It wasn't like I wanted to be in control or be dominant, but I didn't want to go to spaces of deep emotional surrender because I didn't feel safe to do so. And I was like, well, that could be exactly what I need, right? Or what my soul is longing for because it hasn't experienced that. It was also like, I'm such a bad bitch in my life as I go about things and such a leader and such an alpha female and all that, that it didn't fit my idea of myself. And yet it is so true. I actually don't even like being a dom in the bedroom. And you could kind of say maybe like I spiritually dom people for a living, right? I'm just like, know your greatest erotic power. And people are like, yeah. And then when they won't do it, I'm like, here's all the tools to do it. And they're like, okay, mistress. And then they do it. They're like, yeah. Right? It's like, it's so good.
Yeah.
So there was all of that. And then that I'd never had, many of us do, as you mentioned, get initiated through having a lover, right? Who wants that sort of thing. And that can have a shadow side, as you're mentioning, which is if our lover is wired a certain way that just really doesn't do it for us, it's a bad match, right? But sometimes you can have a lover who's wired in a certain way and they open you to all the possibilities. And I've never, up until the last year, I never matched with anyone who had a kinky orientation as far as they knew, or who practiced BDSM. And so part of that was probably my blockage, but part of it's also just chance. And so I'd never seen it or experienced it. And once I started to play with it, it was like, and this is what I want to articulate for everyone. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm a submissive now. It was like, oh, there's a whole part of my being that was just waiting to be expressed.
Yes.
That was waiting to be loved. That was waiting to be felt. And I don't know that I could have died whole if I hadn't played out that part of my being. So yes, it's like sexual exploration, but it's also making our way towards wholeness.
Oh, I love that. Making our way towards wholeness. And I think it's really important to emphasize too that we can have so many sexual awakenings throughout our life.
Yeah.
And for us who are, we've been in this work for like 15 years, we can still have sexual awakenings. I'm still having sexual awakenings. And it brings out, it helps us to discover a new archetype in ourselves, a new aspect of ourselves that is not separate and never has been separate, but has been dormant or quiet because there's been protector parts around it. And the aspect of kink that I love that brings the spirituality into that space, the consciousness, is when we can, is the fact that we can play out these parts. We can bring in an aspect of ourselves that we have a difficult time with embodying. Smallness is one of them. If we think of submission, it is a surrendering our power to somebody else. Now, we're not actually doing that in kink because we are negotiating ahead of time, and we are in equal power when we negotiate. And then when we step into the scene, we play out, we embody what it's like to be small. And so that can be a really powerful way for us to be able to create a relationship with that aspect of ourselves. In regular day life, I don't want to play small, but how much is smallness unconsciously being played out with me and life? In my career, in my work, with my friends, or, wherever it may be. And so here it gives me a play space to be that.
And I think something that a lot of people don't understand about submission is there's this concept of subspace, right? Mm-hmm. For me, submissiveness doesn't feel small, although I fully agree with you on—
It can be.
It can be. I fully agree with you that what is amazing to me about what people call BDSM or kinky play is it's this constructed consensual space to embody archetypal energies.
Yes.
So small, big,
Power.
dominant, weak, right? Like, yes, like high power, low power, light, shadow, right? Bitchiness, unworthiness, right? Like princess, yeah, pleaser, right? Like, and all these things that like sometimes we shame ourselves for being out in the real world. Now, in the tantric tradition, one of the most powerful practices is to consciously embody all these dimensions, right? There are different aspects of the goddess, different aspects of consciousness, and you can do that in theater, right? I had a tantric guru who once said, like, the only place where tantra was maintained in the European culture was through theater training, because you would learn to be all these different expressions of consciousness.
Yeah.
Now, what can be cool about BDSM is you actually create a conscious container to be those aspects of self with another.
Yes.
And with Eros, which is so sexy. And one of the pieces of subspace that can be so powerful for me is it's not just that my mind lets go, but my body lets go.
Yes.
And when I've been with a partner for a while who really invited my physical body into subspace. So when he expressed his dominance and his power, my whole body relaxed in a way that even if I'm in deep dancing surrender, it doesn't relax the same way. Even if I'm in ecstatic meditation surrender or plant medicine space with my girlfriends, right? It doesn't relax in the same way. There was like a primal relaxation that occurred that for me was so exquisitely sublime. And what's interesting, I experienced that kind of primal relaxation, maybe not physiologically in my body, but spiritually when I teach, right? And so a lot of what we're seeking is like, where do I feel flow?
Yes.
Where do I feel presence, deep presence and flow, right? Flow states. That's what we're seeking. And sometimes in sex, it's like, where could I find a flow state? And maybe asking ourselves that question can be so powerful as opposed to where can I find climax, right? Because where could I find flow state in sex opens a whole bunch of doorways of possibility.
And that's where it all becomes very meditative. Sex becomes psychedelic. It becomes meditative. And I want to premise this with describing what subspace is and dom space is, because that'll be really important for people to be able to anchor to. It's this space in which your whole consciousness and your body drops into that particular role. Yeah. Everything else falls away. Everything else really dissolves, and your pure presence with whatever it is that you are doing. As it relates to subspace, you may drop into the experience of submitting. Like you said, with flow state, with meditation, your body may take on a role. Like sometimes my eyes will drop, or my body will drop, or it'll become really rigid depending on whatever it is that I'm playing out with my partner. When I'm doing rope bondage, I drop into a trance state. My body gets really limp, and you can move me anywhere and everywhere. And everything just relaxes into the being that's holding me. And everything else, I can't even tell you what's going on around me because I'm so in this pure presence of what's here. In dom space, it's the same way. It's like you feel the surge of power. You feel this experience of really holding as a container of somebody else, and you have them. You are so present to them. And the sub, is so present to themselves. So I had a teacher, Colette Pervet, who I also teach alongside. She uses this concept of the person who's the top, or the person who's dominating, is subconscious, meaning they are conscious of their sub. And the submissive, or the person playing out the bottom, is self-conscious, meaning they are fully conscious of themselves and their process of themselves. And this also helps us to feel the energy exchange between two people when they are solely in their roles. And this can be tied to the concept of polarity that we talk about in Tantra and energetics as well. This idea that two people are holding different roles, and if the person on bottom tries to do the top's job, it's going to break that desire. It's going to break that special magnetic energy between them. So in order to both maintain that polarity, but also to be able to bring somebody into submission, the person who is topping or dominating must hold a very tight container here, and a container of presence, of groundedness, and finding resonance of their groundedness with the other person and bringing them into a grounded state, a space of encouragement and freedom of judgment. And when any of these break, then that you can lose, the person on bottom no longer feels safe. We have this in all forms and fashions, whether it's in relationships, if this is in my therapy room, if somebody loses presence, if somebody's not grounded in themselves, if they're not encouraging a safe space here, then why would anybody surrender into that? Why would anybody let go of their bodies? They can't trust that you're going to be able to hold them. And that's such an important key for any of this to happen. In love too. If we can't trust that our partner's going to be present with us, going to show up for us, and they get distracted, or they're over here, we don't feel safe. Physiologically, we don't feel that in our body.
Hey, I'm taking a moment to share with you about one of my most powerful programs. This is the Vita Coaching Certification. It is a year-long professional training in how to have a tantric approach to sex, love, and relationships. It will not only transform your experience of sex, love, and relationships to the highest possibility for you in this lifetime, but will empower you with the keys, tools, and technology to be able to offer the same for your clients, because you will have such potent results that you can get for clients in an area that they most deeply desire. You will also be able to charge premium pricing for your coaching packages. We not only train you in Vita Coaching on the art of coaching, but also extensive business training so that you can sell your coaching packages as well. If doing one of the most powerful, most transformative, most effective trainings around sex, love, and relationships is something that you are called for to professionalize your healing gifts and skills, head on over to laylamartin.com, sign up in the Vita coaching area to find out more about the program, or get on my email list anywhere on laylamartin.com, and we will let you know about the program, when it opens, how you can apply, and when you can join. All right. So you said the word sexual awakening recently.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about what a sexual awakening is, how one can have it. I also want to address the fact that you still hadn't had sex until you were 23.
Yes.
And I couldn't go into Victoria's Secret. So we both earned our place at this table, which is important for people to understand, not because you have to earn your place, but because wherever you're starting out from, like, you can make your way to ownership of your eros, ownership of your sexuality, right? Like, we've both been on deep journeys to get to this thing that I know is a prize in both of our lives: play, eros, magic, celebration of sexuality, full expression of sexuality. And neither of us started anywhere near that
No.
with our Catholic upbringing. So we'll address that quickly. But first, we're going to drink sex magic, which you were one of the very first people to ever try sex magic when we were at a birthday party in Mexico City. And I was like, yo, will you try this thing that I made? And you were like, absolutely.
With full enthusiasm. Yeah.
I'm literally sweating so hard that I have sweat dripping off my elbow right now, and I was going to hide it. And I was like, wait, why would we hide that in this conversation?
Yeah, no. I can lick it for you if you want. Would that make you feel better? Or maybe we'll just stick to sex magic.
Well, we can actually, Jameson, could we have some watermelon kiss cat at a great idea? We'll feed each other watermelon as we drink the sex magic because,
And get you some juicy.
Yay. So this has really cool herbal ingredients. It's got saffron. It's got huperzine, which is a sexy moss that helps with lubrication. It's got cool things like ginger in it that help with vasodilation, as Dr. Wednesday Martin so intelligently called it, which basically means that you got more blood flow, which makes you more sensitive. Shilajit, which gives energy. And the huperzine A is like the sexy, sexy moss. So it's this cool ritual that you can do to play, to do yoga, to have sex. I feel like it makes my body feel a little bit more glittery. It's legal herbs, so you gotta, temper your expectations. It's not MDMA, but
Important fact, yes.
important fact. Sometimes people write in and they do the essential of like, why don't the legal herbs make me have 12 orgasms and stay up all night and feel the most like exquisite things in my body? And I'm like, because it's legal.
I get that question a lot with Kana because I use Kana in some of my breathwork classes that I do for sensuality. And I have to remind people, I'm like, this is not MDMA because it's people that's been spread, in the media of like, oh, Kana is the, replacement for MDMA. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's good.
It's more subtle. But the thing about being more subtle is you can do it every day.
Yeah.
You can't do MDMA every day. And also when we work with subtle plants and herbs, we also activate our connection. It's like coffee in some ways, unless you drink a ton of it, can be subtle. Tea is subtle, but there's still a noticeable effect. Mm-hmm. Bottoms up, baby.
Oh, yeah. Oh, damn, girl. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Do you want to dom feed me that watermelon as a sub so we can actually just demo?
Yeah. Bring me back to some good times.
Why keep this theoretical, All right.
I want you to hold my eye gaze. And I want you to open your mouth. I'm going to place this on your tongue. And you're going to count down from 3, 2, 1 before you swallow. Yeah? Yeah. Good. Count.
3,
A louder?
3, 2,
Yeah.
1.
I didn't tell you to swallow.
Mm.
And now.
Mm.
Such a good girl.
That tasted way better than any other watermelon I've ever tasted. I was just so fun.
Yeah.
Playing with arrows.
It's the directing. Again, it's getting you so focused on your experience. You're focused on what I'm doing, and opening your mouth and feeling the taste and then waiting and then almost and then so there's an edging factor in there. And I really do believe that there is a part inside of us that wants to let go. We have this inner urge to surrender, but there's this part of us that's afraid of what happens when we do that. And so this allows that to happen.
The wildest thing too about surrender, right? When everyone's like, but what if I get hurt?
Yeah.
The thing I finally learned is like, you're going to get hurt either way. Not surrendering never stopped you from getting hurt. And you're either going to get hurt because you're going to open all the way and you're going to get your heart broken, or someone's going to let you down. Or you're going to hurt on your deathbed because you never let yourself play. So you don't get to escape the hurt. Do you want to open or not?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean like, oh, of course, don't open into something that's truly unhealthy. Like don't open into violence or unconsensuality or toxicity. But so many of us spend our lives saying like, I don't want to surrender. I don't want to open up. I don't want to have the deep orgasm. I don't want to open my heart. I don't want to open my pussy because what if it hurts? What if there's heartbreak? And you're like, there's going to be hurt and heartbreak either way. So why not open? And to me, that's where the actual true safety comes in, right? I'm going to choose partners and situations that are foundationally safe, but no one's perfect. I'm going to choose partners and situations where my boundaries are honored, right? Where I'm listened to, and someone can always leave. Someone can always break your heart. Even if you stay together your entire lives until you die in each other's arms, they're still going to break your heart a couple of times,
Yeah.
So like, what does it look like to not wait to surrender until we know that we're 100% safe? And I'd actually love to ask you this as a question. What would a situation look like? Like, what would you be looking for to say, it's safe enough to surrender, but here's the real key psychologically, it will never be 100% safe. That's what makes surrender an art.
Oh, I have so many answers to this. So we're going to take this in layers.
Yeah. I'm going to use a watermelon meanwhile. I'm going to dom myself. My hand is going to dom my mouth.
Yeah. Because there is that where we stay closed and we're really tight in the bud, trying to, with all of our protector parts, not wanting to get hurt. And then there's also the other side of the coin for people who are so fluid with their boundaries, as in so loose with their boundaries that they keep the desire to surrender is what's leading, and it's blurring their discernment because they so want to be held. They so want to be just let go and chaotic. And I get it. Like chaos is such a powerful place to be in. Like I love the raw surge of being in chaos. But if I don't have a strong container within myself, I burn out, I get hurt, I get, So these are two ends of the spectrum here. And I think it's really important for us to cultivate that ability to be our own container for ourselves, to be able to self-regulate, to be able to have presence, to be able to understand our own patterns and our own inner desires and our own inner vulnerabilities, to be able to make some of these healthier choices for us. It comes down to therapy. It comes down to therapy, doing self-development work or coaching or something where you get introspective of yourself, because in this pursuit of wanting love, that desire can precede, it always precedes the amount of time we have to gather information of whether it's time to trust this person or whether this person is a proper fit. And so that can blur our discernment. Similarly, for those of us who've experienced trauma in our life, and especially childhood trauma, our ability to discern boundaries, our ability to discern what's healthy or not is impacted. So we may outsource our discernment to somebody else, saying like, you know better than I do, or we assume that the other person is healthy for us while we dissociate from the times that it's bad or that it's painful. And so that can only be understood, when we go through this self-development process, when we get introspective, when we do the therapy to be able to unravel that for ourselves.
So when you say discernment, like I'm trying to discern whether someone is safe or not, let's say as a sexual partner but a romantic partner, what kind of things are they looking for? Like, what are you discerning about?
Yeah. How present is the person?
What is presence?
Presence is, are they looking me in the eye? Are they asking me questions? Are they not rushing me? Are they patient? Are they compassionate? Like, all of these are really important aspects of that, that container, that presence piece, because we can't be ourselves if we feel that there's an agenda, or if we feel that pressure, little or big, overt or covert, to be something that we're not, or to do something that's not authentic for us. So I have couples come to me all the time where one of the partners will say that they did something, or they had sex with their partner when they didn't want to, over and over and over and over and over again. And not because their partner isn't loving, but because their partner is so in their shame or in their fear that they can't actually attune to their partner and what's going on. It's the desire to have sex, or it's the desire to feel connected, or to have their attachment needs or their insecurity met through sex, overrides their ability to be present. And I say these in these ways not to demonize anybody, because even somebody who's unhealthy has their own vulnerabilities, has their own parts in process that they need to be responsible and do the work to be able to discover and resolve. And that's not our work to do either. If they happen to be activated and grow from engaging with us, beautiful. However, we need to be careful not to be the savior of them or try to do the work or function for them too. So it's listening to your nervous system's responses and communicating them, and owning your own experience, not blaming the other person, but saying, I'm noticing that I'm feeling a little more anxious when I come over. And I'm noticing that there's this part of me, and this takes time. Like, I'm not expecting anybody to be able to be as tuned to this, but I'm noticing that there's a part of me that feels like I have to perform for you. And maybe you can tell me what's going on for you. And how they respond to that gives you information. Information, not to, again, judge them as a bad person, or label them as you're an avoidant attachment figure or whatever, or narcissist. I hear that one a lot. But more of overused. But more of information for you of, is this the right fit? Is this somebody that I want to share my body with? Is this somebody, and that can change. You can share your body one time, and then they do something, and then you can have this visceral feeling of like, okay, I don't want to share my body again with them.
And I think it's important to note that some teeny tiny percentage of the world has gotten to being fully safe, right? And I know right now, based on like some of your recent relational experiences, you're even more of a stand now for like how healthy and beautiful and easy certain partnerships can be, right? And I think for many of us, that is good messaging to hear. And the vast majority of people get together and they have to do some level of work to learn to be emotionally safe, to learn to be sexually safe. So I think we're also discerning the difference between true red flag behaviors, right? Someone emotionally attacking you, someone truly gaslighting you, someone disappearing for long periods of time, someone blaming or judging you without taking self-responsibility, right? Someone doing something really painful and not feeling accountable or doing the work to repair, right?
Yeah.
But I think we also want to not be so sensitive that someone does one unsafe thing or triggers us once. It's more about, how do they handle it? How do they respond? How do they grow? Can you grow together? Because some people watching also will be younger, right? When you're younger, we all grew into more safety. I certainly didn't know how to be
Absolutely.
emotionally safe. I had to learn how to do it over time. And so I think part of that discernment as well is like, can we grow, but also having the boundary to say, like, this isn't going to change easily. Like, safety is a long road. And so if you don't want to be with the person the way they are right now, the road to safety is probably going to be a living hell, right? But if you love the person as they are right now, you could be with them as they are, and you both know that you have work to do to grow in your emotional and sexual safety. That to me is a healthy relationship dynamic for two people to be in.
Yeah. I always look at it as it's not the absence of mistakes. It's not the absence of fights or conflict. That's a part of relationships and you being individuals in the relationship. It's about the repair attempt. You know, how are the two or more people coming together to find resolution, to see the other person, to listen to the other person? And that can take a bit. But if, again, like you said, if there's this is off the table, we're taking this off the table, we're not going to have this conversation, we're not, or you feel them have reaction, but they can't speak to that and they won't speak to it. Can't and won't are two different things. Can't, these are skills to learn. It is a skill to learn, you know, what's going on inside of us, to communicate. It is a skill to be vulnerable. It took me a long time to learn to be vulnerable. But that willingness or leaning into it and choosing to do that is really important. Yeah.
This is sex magic. This comes from the supplement company Mood that I created. These are sexy supplements. They are plant-activated formulations vetted by our all-female research team for efficacy, and they allow you to enhance the amount of pleasure and sensitivity you feel in your body. So sex magic is to be taken as a ritual before making love, before doing sex magic, before self-pleasuring, and it will enhance your sensitivity, will enliven your body. It kind of makes me feel like sparkly and a little bit glittery. It has vasodilation properties, which means you have more blood, which means you're going to feel more alive, feel more awake. And you know what? Real important, it tastes good. So that really beautiful purple color comes from blueberries. It's sweetened with monk fruit. So it's got no like artificial sweeteners in it, no sugar in it. And it's really damn good. So you can find it by heading on over shopmood.com. That's shopmood.com. Finding sex magic. And if this is something you want to use to light up your sex life, please join me because it brings so much more pleasure and delight to living an erotically charged life.
So, as I promised, we said the word sexual awakening. Can you describe your first sexual awakening and what a sexual awakening is? So take us a little bit to like who you were when you were younger, what that sexual awakening looked like, and then I'd love for us to share with everyone, how can you have a sexual awakening? What contributes to that?
Yeah. Okay. So my background, I have some sexual trauma when I was younger. That led into childhood depression and eating disorders and a lot of anxiety. I dissociated a lot as a tool to cope, and relationships would last about 2 weeks, and then I would have a panic attack, and then I would break up with them. And that happened, you know, through my teens into college, and I was excellent at like drawing people in, but then I would stop it and then push away. So that's my background there. And then I was 21 when I was reading Red Book magazine, and they quoted a sex therapist. And I decided that that's what I wanted to be, even though I had never had sex before, even though it terrified me. And I still had this mentality that, you know, sex, you know, there's something shameful around it. So that's when I decided, and I went to grad school to become a doctor in this. And I read all the information that I could about how penises worked, and I would bring it up in conversation, you know, just to help me manage the anxiety inside of myself. First time I had sex, I was 23 with my boyfriend, who did not know that I had never had sex. And I had this experience of, you know, if you think of the first time that you had sex, like it was just like, oh, that's it. You know, it's like a sense of fullness, but then, you know, it's all sensationalized and everything. So I had this experience of like, okay, that's interesting. Afterward, I was like, okay, there's got to be more to this. Like, I don't know. Like everybody, been saying it's this cool thing. But then he broke up with me because he didn't feel like we were sexually compatible. But after that, I just went on a bender and I was just having sex with multiple people and feeling more of this, allowing, it was really other people that were showing me how sex was. And I was like, okay, just moving my own body. But the first time somebody bit me, I was like, what? Oh, I like that, And so it had these little sexual awakenings. And then I was, studying Tantra, but I wasn't fully embodying it. It was more of the white Tantra, more of the chanting, more of the breath practices. But again, I could not drop down into my pussy, into my pelvic floor. And then I was 24, 25 when I was studying to be a sex therapist, and they took us to a dungeon. And and a dungeon is a public play space for BDSM. And the master dominant was there, and he was demoing, and I volunteered my little hand, and I was like, oh, pick me, So he was using these toys and these tools on me, and then grabbing me, and I was like, oh my God, I feel tingly inside. And then at the end of the night, he comes up to me and he goes, when do you want to have your practice, or when do you want to have your scene? And he had demoed with a bunch of people in the space. And so I went up there and we went through a whole scene. And it was, and I don't recommend people who are new to this to do as much as I did, because that can bring up a lot. It can be emotionally dangerous. And I know that now in retrospect, but in the moment, I was just letting him guide me, right? And so he tied me up, and he used electric toys, and he used floggers, and he used, all these different practices. And my whole body let go, and I was like honey, just like this liquid on the St. Andrew's cross. And I was orgasming like I had never experienced before. And I was in this incredible trance state that was psychedelic. And I was like, what the fuck is going on here? What does this feel so good? And
Can you tell us what a St. Andrew's cross is, just so everyone gets the benefit of knowing what was happening?
Yes, except now I'm really turned on. No, I'm kidding. But really. So a St. Andrew's cross is a cross, but it's like an X. So it's a giant X that you will tie somebody to, you will link cuffs to so that they're in place. And it's used so that they can hold them in place so that you can do a scene on. So whether it's impact play with floggers or even just a practice of, so it's restraint. You can't get away. And negotiated. And so that, I remember leaving there and feeling in a daze of like, what just happened? What did I just experience? And then after that, I became so hungry for BDSM. I was obsessed with it. I wanted to think about it all the time. I researched it all the time. I read about it. I went to events, and it was this eye-opening self-recognition, just empowerment. I had never been in lingerie, so walking around in this dungeon in lingerie was an edge for me.
Hard to imagine that now.
I know. Now I'm a queen
Cat
of lingerie.
could live in lingerie, like it feels like you were born in lingerie. Like you just popped out, like in fucking bordel or whatever.
Yeah. But being in that space, in this dungeon where so many people of different sizes, different body shapes, different, walks of life, were all there celebrating their sexuality. There were people being walked around on leashes. There were people in full lingerie or naked. There were people who were orgasming in the room full of everyone. And this is like, again, reference point of this image of people fully embodying themselves. And they weren't necessarily, the socially constructed idea of what, attractive is in our culture. And yet they're so attractive because they're in their body and in their expression, and they're owning it. And that, created this ethos of full expression. And we get that in the Tantra community too. It's like you heal when you become whole. And similar in this dynamic, and I see so many similarities between the two of them, is you find wholeness because you allow yourself and you claim yourself and you explore and you discover who you are and what you like.
So I think I'd never thought about this before, but like a sexual awakening, right? Because we use this word, it's like a spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
So a spiritual awakening, you suddenly get more connected to spirituality somehow.
Yeah.
And you might experience what we would consider spiritual phenomenon. So like getting in touch with your intuition, having energy activation. And you want to like do more spiritual practice usually, right? So there's something that like knocks a spiritual awakening. Sometimes it's spontaneous. Sometimes it's that you go and do a meditation retreat. Sometimes you have a new lover or friend or partner who's like super spiritual. Sometimes like for whatever reason your energy activates and it makes you want to do like all these things. But at the heart of it is like, wow, there's this energy opening and I'm going deeper into a truth, into a part of myself. And so it's like the same thing is possible for us in sex. It's like all of a sudden we have more sexual energy. We have more sexual aliveness. And we're more in touch with how vast and beautiful sexuality can be. And we want to explore. We want to know more. We want to do the practice. We want to engage. And that could be 20 years into a marriage, you have a sexual awakening. It could be when you get a divorce, you have a sexual awakening. It could be when you're 23 years old, you have a sexual awakening. You know, it could be someone ties you to St. Andrew's Cross and you're like, wasn't having a sexual awakening before, but I sure as fuck am now, right? All of these pieces. Even me, I would say sexual awakenings in my life happen when I first went to Tantra school and started my first tantric sexual practices. I would say I had a sexual awakening when I had my first boyfriend where we did Kundalini activation practices together. So we were making love with like deeper energy activation. I had a sexual awakening when Andrew wanted to explore threesomes. And at first I was like, oh, fuck no. And then I was like, wait, maybe I do want to make love to hot women. And then that actually snapped open a huge world of sexual awakening. I had a sexual awakening when I was with Andrew and fell in love with another man and started to explore possibilities of, you know, what could a life of polyamory look like? What could more expansion look like? Or even if I never touch this man and stay fully monogamous with Andrew, what can I do with this eros, right? Can this eros be a sexual awakening with or without this other person? And I think we associate sexuality and eros and sexual energy so much with must have physical sex. I think sexual awakenings scare people in the context of monogamy.
Yeah.
But you can have a deep sexual awakening and feed it into your partnership. Right?
Yes.
You can have a deep sexual awakening and decide to leave a sexless marriage, right? I just had dinner with a friend last night who like that's what happened basically. Like they could not find the courage to leave what had been like a 10-year sexless marriage until they had a deep erotic activation, right? So it can work in all these different ways. And I think if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, I'm either having a sexual awakening or want to have a sexual awakening, let's break it down. So I'd love to hear from you, Dr. Kat, if you could share with us, like let's say you want to have a BDSM sexual awakening. What's like a 101 thing you could do? A tantric sexual awakening, what's a 101 thing you could do? And just a general kind of sexual awakening.
Okay, so for a BDSM awakening, you know, I would highly recommend following somebody who teaches around BDSM because there's so many factors to consider and how to create a safe container, how to negotiate, how to get consent, what to explore. I think
you're an excellent place to start.
I'm an excellent place to start. So go to sexloveyoga.com. But you know, I think many times people just go and buy the handcuffs or they go and buy, you know, the flogger. And then either they are disappointed with the experience because they're like, okay, like my partner is not really in what I'm reading about or what I'm hearing about. I'm not getting a sexual awakening. They're just beating me with a flogger and it hurts.
Totally.
So there's so many
Say no
skills.
sexual awakening.
Yeah, or their partner pulls out the rope and you're like bored because you're laying there and they're just tying you, but there's no like energetic play in the middle of it or So work with somebody who can guide you or introduce you to that. I think similar with Tantra, although with Tantra, I think there's practices of creating intention or dropping into your breath and the sound that you make and the movement and even visualization of energy coursing through you and touch. All of these are accessible to our bodies that we can use to activate the energy or the kundalini. Sexual awakenings. I had a sexual awakening the first time I made out with a woman, the first time that I made out with a man and a woman at the same time. I had sexual awakenings when I started playing with my gender expression, or sexual awakenings when I first met somebody who matched me in this full spectrum of the kink and the tantra and the sensual and the raunchy sex. So it's also just making a devotion to being curious about who you are as a sexual person and knowing that the potentiality here is infinite. Mm-hmm. You just have to be curious, follow your interest, what sparks you, and follow that. Mm. That's really what it comes down to.
I think it's important to realize all of these are their own lineages in a way, which mean you study, you go deep, to get to mastery is a lifetime's process. So I think a really good place to start with a sexual awakening is make a list of your top 10 desires. Mm. What if you could have anything, if you could order from the cosmic waitress, as Emily Fletcher likes to say, and have any sexual experience, what would you have, right? I think that can give you a good sense of what do you want a sexual awakening around, right? Mm-hmm. Do you want to make out with a woman? Do you want to submit? Do you want to be flogged to, within an inch of your consensual life? Do you want enlightenment during sex? Be honest with yourself. I think that can help direct, because a lot of people maybe don't even take the time to identify those desires. And then it's no small thing. If you really want the art of BDSM, yes, follow experts like yourself, right? Read a couple of introductory books, listen to some podcasts, and then hire a coach, go to a workshop, start to embody it, right? Most of my friends who've gotten deeper and deeper into BDSM, they trained. They actually start training as subs or doms. They find teachers. They either work with one-on-one. They go to your retreats. They go to your classes, right? So there's a power to you can't just snap your fingers and know how to do these things. You really, I want to say submit yourself to the work, but you really apply yourself, right? And it's the same with Tantra. Yes, follow people, read books, start with, some of my practices, other teachers, explore. And then when you really want to go deeper, you do the retreats, you do the one-on-ones, you make it important. You would never get great at yoga listening to a podcast about yoga, right? You would then maybe check out a book about it. Then you would go to a class. Then you would do several classes. Then you do a yoga retreat. Then you do a yoga teacher training, right? This is where you get to mastery. And I think what people are hungry for is a kind of sexual mastery, but we don't really have a playbook for it yet in society. And yet it's the playbook for anything else that you want to get great at. And those things are out there. And if you just want a straight up sexual awakening, I would say take 20 minutes every week, set a timer, and breathe into your pussy or your cock or your intersex genitals and touch yourself and feel, right? Yeah. And then read the books and listen to the podcasts and do the practices. And it's amazing what's in there. There's a whole universe of magic inside of us. And I love that we have teachers like you really showing us the way of how we can tap into that magic.
Right back at you, babe.
All right. Tell everyone how they can follow you, how they can work with you.
Yeah, so they can find everything that I do at sexloveyoga.com. They can follow me on Instagram at sexloveyoga. They can also come to my podcast, Sex Love Psychedelics, where we talk about the psychedelic nature of sex and the use of psychedelics for our sexual awakening. And or they can, if they want something juicy to listen to, they can follow my Erotically Wasted podcast and just get inspired. Well, I don't know what I want. What do I want in sex? Well, listen to my podcast and it might give you some ideas.
Hell yes. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Kat. Such a pleasure to have you here.
You too. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. So today's practice, to make this real, make that list of your top 10 sexual desires and really tune in. What do you really, really, really want? Write them down and do it right now. No time like the present. You're not going to remember in the future. Just take a moment, and that alone, just taking the time and putting them down on paper can produce a sexual awakening, a sexual direction, a sexual activation that can be super, super powerful and change the direction of your erotic life. Thank you for listening to this Tantric Life. I am Layla Martin. This is the home for the realest conversations about sex, spirituality, polarity, conscious relationships, and all kinds of topics that help us live the absolute most incredible lives. Please check out the next episode. Please go ahead and leave your rating and review on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. It's so, so, so helpful when you do that. If you want to stay connected to me, the most helpful supportive thing you can do is to head over to laylamartin.com, sign up with your email address. That connects you to me if you want to study deeper with me, if you want to receive my deeper teachings. I do it predominantly via email. Finally, you can check me out on Instagram at @the Layla Martin. And thank you so, so, so much for being here.